Hello, hello out there, Nancy Cogar, and it's boomer time. Hope you've had a great week. I have. It's been busy, but it's been a good week. Today, I want to talk about something that I don't think I've touched on in the podcast to date, and this is episode 89. Can you believe it? Sorry I waited so long. We are going to talk about something that, or someones that have been labeled solo agers. They have to come up with a name for everything, right? But these are individuals. I get lots of people like this come into my office. There are people that are not married, people that lost a spouse, people that didn't have any children. They're essentially soloing it as they age. And like I said, it's not as uncommon as you might think. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, and I want to talk about the challenges that these solo agers may face. First, I wanted to touch on a few headlines. There's a really disturbing headline that's out this week that is coming from Nashville television station WKRN. They are reporting that there was a state audit that has revealed that Tennessee has failed to report thousands of complaints that were filed against nursing homes in the state. And there was a required timeline to the federal government, and some of these complaints are more than 5 years old. This report that came out, the lawmakers are responding to it and so forth, saying that they're concerned, but there's no action. This is just the headline now, but I think this is something that we need to continue to follow. That is disturbing, I know, for a lot of you that maybe had a bad experience at a facility. So here's something a little more light. Well, we always talk about, is our president too old for this, that, right? It's one of the things we argue about. Well, the world's oldest president is looking to run again. And this guy has been in the president's office since 1982, so quite a while. This is CNN reporting this through the Associated Press. But in Cameroon, which is an African country, they are going to vote in an early election to see if Africa's oldest leader, oldest president, can extend his rule by another 7 years. All right, well, he's 92, so he would be 99 if he wins and he lives through his term. So, but it's possible. We talk about those centenarians, right? People are living longer, more 100-year-olds out there too, especially in other parts of the world. So I had one more headline I wanted to mention to you because it's about Michael Jackson. So Michael Jackson's estate is billions. $1.125 billion is the estimated worth. Well, his oldest daughter has received, this is big news in California, she has received $65 million from the estate. $65 million. Well, you take that with who it is, her father, had great success and money, obviously, as a result. But I think she's young. She's in her 30s or so. Hopefully she has some people that will protect her and tell her to make some good decisions with that money, because you hear about that too. So anyway, those are the headlines, and I'll get to solo agers right after this. Welcome back. I saw some of you have taken the time to subscribe and follow the podcast, which I really appreciate. And if you haven't done that already, do me a favor. I know you hear about that all the time, but it really makes a difference and will help me to reach more people. So you see the little bell? Click that to follow, and the subscribe button, click that to subscribe. That's all you got to do, and I would sure appreciate it. So today we are talking about solo agers. And these are people that, for whatever reason, didn't have any children, may not be married, or maybe they're the surviving spouse. That counts too. They don't have any surviving family. I've had clients as old as 96 and 94 come in, and sharp as tacks, they're administering their older sister's estate. So it's possible, but she didn't have any kids either. So I'm just saying that this is an important issue, and it does present some challenges. It's not the same as when I meet with a husband and wife, or they've got 3 kids, and it's a simple kind of or simpler, I should say. There are always issues and everything, but it's a challenge. And a lot of times these folks will ask me, I'm the last one standing. I don't know who I'm supposed to pick to help me. What am I going to do? Um, it is a challenge, but I've got some suggestions here today that might help. So what we're talking about, of course, is being able to have planning documents, enforceable planning documents for your healthcare and for your financial personal affairs that would help to take effect and help have someone authorized that you trust making these decisions for you during those times. So this is very important to take care of, but it is a challenge, especially when maybe you're never married. Maybe you had a sister and she passed away, and you're the last member of the family. What do you do in those circumstances? Especially if you've got a very large estate, that can make it even more complicated. What do you do with all that stuff, right? Well, the first thing I want to tell you is solo aging is not as uncommon as you think. So I see these types of folks that would fit into this category, a couple times a month, really. And this will prove it to you too. The U.S. Census Bureau said that 28% of our population here in the U.S. right now is over 65. And those numbers are growing. The number of people living alone at 65 plus, this surprised me. 16 million people. So that's a lot of people. And 75 years ago, things were totally different. That number was a lot lower, of 10%. Now we're at 28%, and it's growing. This is part of that sign of the Silver Tsunami that I talk about. And just it's going to put strain on healthcare facilities, government, all these types of things, transportation, the labor market. It's just going to impact everyone. So, of course, I've said, talk to a professional, put a plan in place. I do not want you to get blasted by that tsunami. This is about that too. So if you're going to live alone, that's a choice you make. Some people do very well with it. You need to have a support system in place along with a plan. That seems like that's common sense, doesn't it? You got to have, what if something goes wrong? Who are you going to call, right? You don't have a spouse. You don't have any family. This can include friends, new friends, old friends. I have people who tell me, well, they're all just as old as I am, so why should I pick them? I always say it's all right to pick them if they're willing to do it, and let's look at alternates, okay? Because that's what you do in that case. That's one of my plan Bs. So maybe you choose a niece or a nephew, maybe someone in your extended family. It could even be a third party, like I said, but you have to specifically name these folks. That's because of all these privacy laws today. You need someone who's authorized by an enforceable document to make these decisions for you. That includes medical decisions and financial. This is an absolute necessity. You also want that support system and the people you put in those places to be reliable, right? Well, that's another challenge, because I have people that come in and they say, yeah, they've got 4 kids, but they don't trust any of them. What do you do in that case? I think you don't pick them. And I would have someone else stand in, maybe be the person for you, and maybe be the person that administers your estate thereafter. You still want the kids to get something, but you don't necessarily trust them. I hear about that all the time. You do need those healthcare documents, like I said, but you also want to look at where you're living currently and the options. So you would look at the safety of your home, the accessibility of showers, bathtub, toilets, stairs, any kind of mobility hazards. Those you got to look at those, and you've got to address them. That's the smart thing to do, really. If you're going to live at home, you need to get those hazards out of the way, because what's going to happen is sooner or later you're going to have a problem. You're going to fall, possibly, and you're going to end up in the hospital. And that is the number one reason people don't go back home. So do these things, and it will help to prevent that. And help you stay in your house longer if that's what you want to do. Financial security, you need to spend time with a professional. How are you going to pay for all this? How do you make your money go as far as it can, right? If you live to 90, or say you live to 100 and you're 70 now, that's 30 years. So more people are looking at working longer, maybe going back to work. These are all strategies, but it's something you have to look at. You have to talk to a professional about some of these issues. It's just, I think it's a non-negotiable at this point. Then there comes the whole other issue of the isolation and sometimes depression that you can see when people live alone. That can add to aging too. That emotional kind of slow down. You need to find some activities that interest you. There's a lot of people that are in your situation. Just take a look at things that interest you and opportunities to connect. I was researching all of this, I found a lot of things out there. I didn't want to recommend one or the other, because that's not fair. But there's quite a variety. So if you're a solo ager and you're out there and you're looking for a group that likes to hike, or a group that likes to bike, or a group that likes to listen to music, whatever it is, I'm sure it's out there. And I would encourage you to reach out and find out what they do and who's involved. And hey, it might be life-changing. So I want to talk about some other concerns when you're the only one, besides people saying to me, well, who's going to make these decisions for me? I don't have anybody left. That's the first question, right? And then the second question is, a lot of times, what happens to all my stuff? I don't have anybody to give it to. I don't want to give it to certain people. It's your stuff. You can decide who you want to give it to, but you have to put it in an enforceable document, either a will, which will require court and probate, or a trust. It's going to be a necessity. So once again, right, go to a professional. I want to talk a little bit more about inheritance and what might happen if you don't plan. There's a default, and I guarantee you won't like it, but I think it's important to talk about. So I'm going to take a quick break, and when I come back, we'll talk about that. Welcome back to Boomer Time. I'm so glad you're staying with me. It is going to be worth your while because I'm going to offer you some information that really could be life-changing. So we're talking today specifically about solo agers. That means people who are choosing to live alone in their older years. So I've already talked about some of the issues you need to look at. You absolutely need to plan. You absolutely need to figure out who can serve as your proxy in a power of attorney if you need it. These are crucial issues. So Before we took the break, I was talking about estate planning concerns, more specifically related to inheritance, right? So I get people who come in, like I said, that say, they don't have anybody left. So who are they supposed to give this property to? Or maybe they don't like who's left, or they don't want to give it to their grandkids, and they're looking for options. Or maybe they want to give it to the grandkids, but a little bit at a time. So these are the types of things that we talk about, and it's not uncommon. So don't worry if you're in that situation. But when it comes to being the last man standing, maybe, I think you really need to kind of reflect more on your legacy, because at that point, you are the only one there. So maybe think about friends, good friends that have been there for you, maybe friends that you're naming to help you in an emergency, you know, um, maybe extended family. You got cousins, maybe you've got uh, like family individuals. I know I've got those in my life, and, I love them as much as I would love a traditional family member. So you'll need to specifically name people like this, especially if they're not legally your family, so not blood or not adopted. So that's critical, okay? So you can basically give it to anybody you want, just as long as they're specifically named. You can also think about church or temple, the faith body that you've been with for years. Maybe you want to give to a certain project. Charities. We've got lots of nonprofits. I have people who give over a variety, as a backup, and some have just created a strategy that this is where they want this to go in these portions. And they feel good about that because they're making some purpose out of their property after they don't need it anymore. So I would seriously encourage that. And it's work. It takes time to think about these things, but that's what I'm here for. So here's the dangerous news, okay? So if you don't do anything and you don't have anything enforceable, guess what? It is going to go to the default. You're relying on the government to figure this out. So they're one of two options. If you have no will, no directive as far as what's supposed to happen with your things, your property, it will either go to remote relatives, maybe ones that you've never even met, because we have to go back on that tree and find the branch over here. And, that is not the best choice. The other choice is not good either, in my opinion, is that your property will go to the state. I wouldn't want that. So just another reason you need to look at these things. And you could really do a lot of good, even though you're the last one here. Think about what's important to you, what you care about. I mean, it's a real opportunity to leave some legacy in that way. I can talk more about that in another episode. Matter of fact, there's some folks I want to have on that can talk more expanded about that, but there's some great options. Well, so maybe you're solo aging and you really shouldn't be. That's a concern, right? Because as I said before, it can lead to an injury that will lead to all kinds of problems. Well, I thought it was worthwhile to mention 5 signs. This was in a recent Forbes article. 5 signs that you shouldn't live at home, okay? If somebody in your life is exhibiting this kind of behavior and you see it, say you're a witness or you're experiencing it, you might want to sit down with them and talk to them about reassessing their current situation. Those are the signs and symptoms. Things like forgetting to take your medicine, making appointments and missing them, getting lost in what should be familiar places, losing weight with no clear explanation, or just forgetting or ignoring meals, I know I had to encourage my dad to eat. He would forget. And it doesn't take long before your strength starts to fade on you. You got to keep the muscle fed, body fed, and this is a sign, folks. So same thing with hygiene. If you see someone in your life, they're unbathed, they're wearing the same clothes, their hair's a mess, they're not as together as they once were. That's a sign that they maybe shouldn't be living at home or should bring some support in. And absolutely, as I already mentioned, falls, hospitalizations, medical diagnosis, those things oftentimes are the springboard that lead to the discussion. The discussion that I think you need to follow with action, right? Well, and it all boils down to what I've said before about the population growing. So I know you hear this from me a lot, but it's true. So all the boomers out there, that's why this show is called Boomer Time, you are all becoming closer and closer to 65, or maybe you're already beyond it. But the National Council on Aging looked at this recently, and there's 30% of our population is over 65. Here's how it's going to change, right? In just 5 years, all boomers will be over age 65 and beyond, right? By the next 10 years, there'll be 78.3 million Americans over 65. And you pair that with people that are living to 90s and 100 beyond, you need a plan. You need a plan. I think that's the best thing you can do for yourself and your family. You need to plan. So you have to have a conversation. Start it with this conversation. Either you initiate it, right? Or maybe someone in your circle sees some things going on and has the courage and the care to address this important task. So, if you live, you could, rather than having assisted living as an option or living at home, you could move in with family. I see people doing all kinds of creative things that just really impress me. Building a mother-in-law suite onto an existing house. They do that to avoid the cost of nursing home care. Keep somebody at home with their family in a comfortable place that doesn't feel like it's invading anyone's privacy, right? You've got boundaries. You could look at independent living. There are communities there. When the people move in, they make friends, there's activities, and they all vary. So you got to pick the one, got to look at more than one, and then you've got to pick the one that feels comfortable to you. Maybe you'll know somebody there. That's always a great thing. Or you have to find a way to bring some more support in. And I've talked a lot about that. There's some options for that. You just have to sit down and plan. So I'm going to end today with some questions that I found in a Kiplinger article. I thought they were really good. So if you're on the fence with this whole planning thing and you haven't started it, or you've been thinking about it and haven't done anything yet, or maybe you did something a while back and it needs to be updated, ask yourself these questions, okay? Because if you do it solo, or say a new circumstance arose and now you're solo, you need to know who might be a resource for you, a reliable resource. And like I said, backups are important. So ask yourself these questions. So 1, who will you call if you have an emergency at 2 a.m. in the morning? I suspect for most people that would be a pretty short list. If you don't have a list, I always think it's better to have those numbers plugged into your cell phone or somewhere where they're easy to dial. But that's a good question, right? And it's probably telling about who you might pick to be your attorney, in fact, if there is an emergency. If you're having trouble deciding on that, who would you call? Who would you call if you fell and it was 2 o'clock in the morning and you couldn't get back up. I know some of you would say, I just sleep there and call in the morning, but that's not what I'm talking about. This is a call that needs to be made, right? So think about it. And here's a practical question. Do you know how to plan? Do you know what needs to be included in the plan? Do you know where you should go? Do you know if it's something that you should risk doing on your own? Wow. Yeah, I've seen people do it themselves and it leads to all kinds of problems. And you don't want those problems down the road when you need the help. So invest in professional and enforceable plans. Do you need a local resource? Who's there? Do you have one? Maybe they retired. So you got to look around and see who you like, who seems like they care, who expresses things in a way that you understand, and get one. What kind of financial documents do you need? What kind of medical documents do you need? What don't you have? And also, I mentioned this before, if you didn't plan to be a solo ager and say your circumstances have changed, maybe your spouse has passed away, what do you need to do to change your plan? You need to take care of yourself. You need to have a plan in place. There's these surprises in life, but they require taking stock of it and putting a plan in place. Finally, I think the answer to this question is no, but do you need to go it alone? Ultimately, I think if you stay home and you're a solo ager, you need to have some community because, like I said, it can easily lead to isolation and even depression. But there are groups out there, there are people out there just like you that want to connect with people. So you just take some work. So if you have any questions about what I've talked about today, reach out. Go to nancycogar.com and send me a line. You know somebody that's got an awesome story about staying in shape and living on their own that might inspire others, send it along. So I want this to be a community too, a community where we're supporting each other, talking about important issues, and finding options that work and avoiding problems down the road, right? So don't forget to subscribe to my podcast. Hit the subscribe button and the little bell. Thank you. So I will see you next time and have a great week.